Morning, I'm Eric Rosenthal. I'm going to be talking about the clinical care data generation project. This project is performed in the Chorus Research Network, and you can see on the left the sites that participate. You can see on the right some of our investigators who are here in the audience, and I may mention a few of them in terms of some of their contributions. The goal of this data set is to focus on the collection and curation of real-world data, which means this is data produced during the process of clinical care. So we don't interact with our participants. We have an IRB that has exempt from consent approval to collect data from including medical records that have electronic health record tabular data, radiology imaging, cardiac telemetry and other waveforms, social determinants or non-medical factors, and practice pattern metadata. That's data about the center that the patient was cared for at, how they treat patients in general. There's a magic button. I found it. Okay. Sorry. So the concept here is at the bottom, you can see where we would like to collect this multi-center, multimodal, and high-resolution set of data for 112,000 patient admissions. We will split this data, as we have with our current releases, into 60% for training, 20% for sort of internal validation, and then 20% for more official validation. And we have a goal to submit that final 20% partition to become an FDA-based medical device development tool, or MDDT. Here's a little bit about the types of standards that we're utilizing. You can see the electronic health record data, demographics, medication administrations, procedures, really very rich nursing flow sheets and diagnoses are all in the OMOP Common Data Model standard. That has not meant that we've been able to use OMOP for everything. We've had to, in some cases, extend OMOP where it doesn't include current standards, for example, for infusions or some of these flow sheet measures. And then the Open Health NLP Toolkit, OHNLP Toolkit, is being used to extract what we call tokens, or sort of numerical representations of medical concepts from medical notes. And we produce them in a string and order as a way of protecting the confidentiality of clinical notes. So only medical terms can be extracted from those notes, and we only share those in that form. And then for imaging, we're using the DICOM standard, and then for waveform telemetry, the waveform database, or WFDB format. We filled in gaps in OMOP by building linkages to waveform and imaging data, which are objects, and so we store them in OMOP as sort of a linked representation. And then, as I said, we've extended OMOP and published back to the Odyssey working groups the appropriate custom standards that have not previously been elaborated. And then more than building a data set, it's important for us to build for the community a sustainable data ecosystem so that you are sort of immersed in the setting of being able to visualize data. And I'll just take you quickly through what I mean by that. So in the center is a portal in which you can access data, and this means that sites can upload their data on the bottom right in pink. There's account governance that describes who's authorized and authenticated to enter the site, which is intended for controlled access. And then there's a central area where engineers can develop and deploy apps. And then on the top and the left, there's a machine learning workspace where people can sort of enter who are given authorization and then authenticate. And then we have various data challenge spaces that we can deploy for different types of datathons. And I'll talk about some of the ones that we've hosted. And then lastly, we've developed a set of what we call Jupyter notebooks, which are sort of Python-based workbooks that sort of teach you step-by-step how to work. And this is an example of one of the challenge portal entrance pages. We've deployed this at the Duke Datathon in March. AIM-Ahead team has been using this in the last couple of months. We're going to be using this today at the Bridge2AI open house, where we'll take you through radiology and EHR demonstrations, and at the Society for Critical Care Medicine Datathon in July. And then just quickly, I'll go through some tools. So an integrated viewer, so you can sort of look modular views and navigate cases and make sort of diagnoses. A cohort annotator, where you can actually apply a label such as arrhythmia or AFib, or label text as PHI or not. The canonical Odyssey tool stack, Aries, to explore the data here. It shows that in our cohort of 45,000 patients, 21,000 have been administered Tylenol, for example. And at the bottom, Atlas, which is a cohort picker, which basically you can either through code or through a graphical interface sort of say, I want this type of combination of patients. Our dashboard gives us a sense in the orange boxes, a heat map of what sites are at what stage of completion and some of the demographics. And on the left, a list of sort of diagnoses that are there and the user base. We've also had some projects. You saw posters yesterday about repairing defects in the continuity of waveform data. So those colored stripes there show us where data is sort of misplaced in the telemetry record and needs to be sort of put in its proper place, or missing packets at the bottom in the middle that need to be filled. And then we have some tools to bring in your own outside model to validate it on our data. Some tools to then build patient or clinician interaction tools, so you can sort of turn the dials on a model and see if you can implement it through sort of implementation science. And then lastly, a current project is to use the RSNA's clinical trial processor tool to de-identify headers. And then we're working on a process with outside vendor for pixel level DID for burned in images that are actually in JPEGs. So our data release in pink is what we've worked on at each stage. We're at the third stage now, and those sort of teal areas are what we're going to be working on: building the volume in our data set, starting to annotate central DID of the radiology images that are de-identified for headers at the sites, and so on and so forth. And this is our accrual rate. We're at the middle in black, where we have about 45,900 admissions, and we're working on sort of building the data quality of that. The sites at the top left are pretty well represented. On the top right, you'll see a spike because we have hospitals that are pediatric hospitals that collect neonatal data, which cluster on the beginning of life. And then we have a lot of racial and ethnic comprehensive range of our patients. And by the numbers, I'll just show you this slide that we have a lot of patients with a lot of very important diagnoses to many of us. There's about 1.6 billion rows of OMOP data in the 45K. And then we have about 21 terabytes of just waveform data, which is a challenge to how we are going to manage that from just these 46,000 admissions so far. So we're aiming towards that 112, but that's where we are right now. And there are 226 active users who are in our portal. So thank you so much, and appreciate your being here.